Hi, how you doing? There have been a few comments recently that this channel has become a little negative. Martial arts don't work, boxers can't punch, that sort of thing. If I'm being honest, that's probably fair. The problem is, controversial statements get you more views, so guilty as charged. Anyway, today I want to do things a little differently, so we're going to find out what the best martial art is. Now, clearly I'm not the first YouTuber to do this. Many others before me have ranked martial arts in order to try and find out what is, in their opinion, the best one. And that's exactly what we're going to do today, but we're going to do it in a slightly different way from the others that I've seen. First, we need a list of martial arts. Aikido, BJJ, boxing, catch wrestling, HEMA, judo, karate, Muay Thai, ninjutsu, savate, taekwondo, and Wing Chun. I picked 12 that feel like a pretty good cross-section of what's out there. Obviously, there's a little bit of bias creeping in already. This is an undeniably arbitrary list from my head, so is clearly going to be influenced by those arts I've had most exposure to. Anyway, rather than simply tell you whether I think they're any good or not, I'm going to attempt to be a little bit more objective in the way we rank them. I'm going to take 3 different categories and score each art out of 10 in order to give a more rounded total. Those categories are aesthetics. How does it look? Is it enjoyable to watch? Can you see what's going on? Does it look impressive? Effectiveness. How well will it prepare you for a violent encounter, whether that's in the ring, the cage, or the street? If this was the only martial art you knew, could you actually fight? Consistency. How likely is it that 2 schools of this art are going to be teaching the same thing in the same way? Are the standards in one place the same as in a completely different place? Once we've ranked all 3 of these, we'll have a total score for each art, and then we'll know which is the best. Seems pretty logical to me. So let's start with Aikido. Aikido is undeniably beautiful. Clearly, there's little in the way of resistance going on when people are demonstrating it, but that's not relevant for this score. The movements are flowing, graceful, and a joy to watch, so we're going to score it pretty highly here. I reckon it deserves 8 out of 10. Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. This is one where my personal bias is really hard to avoid. The fact about grappling is that if you don't understand what's going on when you watch it, it's boring as hell. If you do, it's fascinating, but it's probably not beautiful. Add to that the butt scooting that's annoyingly effective but looks ridiculous. I'm going to have to give it a relatively low score. So I'm going to go with 4. Boxing. Now, I'm sure there are some people who take exception to me including boxing in this list in the first place, but, well, tough, it's my channel. I'd say boxing can be incredibly graceful and impressive to watch. It can be shocking in its raw power and aggression, but it can also be sloppy, dull and messy. Much like grappling, I think you have to understand it to get a true appreciation of what's going on. I think it deserves a 5. Catch wrestling. This one's hard for me, because I really want it to score highly. But it suffers from most of the same issues as BJJ, and has some bizarre cultural aesthetics in its history that really don't help. 20 minutes of solid chest pressure from an immovable fighter might well be incredibly effective, but it's not beautiful to watch, and 2 sweaty men hand-fighting in a boxing ring doesn't really score any higher. It pains me, but I'm going to score it really low. 2. HEMA. Now, I realise HEMA is not one art, it's a collection of different systems, blah blah blah, but it does have a fairly united identity. And whilst it's growing, it's still fairly niche. So I'm going to lump it all together. Undeniably, swords are cool. But bodging together protective gear from what you could find, and wrapping yourself up like the Michelin Man to fight, doesn't look great. And even those fighters supposedly at the top of the tree look messy as hell when they're actually fighting. You can see some beautiful forms and drills from some people, but HEMA prides itself on the fact that it actually fights. So that's how I'm going to judge them. 4 out of 10. Judo. Let's cut to the chase. Judo doesn't look great to watch. Lots of grip fighting, trying to get the dominant position and break the opponent's posture. Very rarely do you see a nice clean throw. It's messy. It works, but that's not what we're talking about here. And the groundwork is nowhere near as advanced as BJJ, so I'm going to put it as a 3. Karate. In some ways, karate is very similar to HEMA. It's actually lots of different arts all grouped together. The forms and drills look great. The fighting looks pretty terrible. I'm going to score it the same. 4. Muay Thai. Now, it's probably because I spent a ridiculous amount of time watching cheesy martial arts flicks when I was a teenager, but I love the aesthetic of Muay Thai. The almost garish satin shorts, the mongkol, the frenetic music, the smell of liniment. I love the aggressive nature of the style too, the constant moving forwards, the use of elbows and knees, the whole thing. It's not just me, right? I accept it may be an acquired taste. So let's give it 6. Ninjutsu. In a lot of ways, I feel this is pretty similar to Aikido in my head. Obviously, there's a whole raft of cultural stereotypes about ninjas that you tend to either love or hate, but there's a graceful nature to the way these guys move that's nice to watch. It's not quite as balletic as Aikido, but it's not far off. Let's give it 6 as well. Savate. I really want to like Savate, but I struggle. In its modern competitive form, it looks pretty much like generic kickboxing, and when you look at older footage, it's just weird. When you look at individual techniques, some of them look a little clunky, and when you do it, the method of movement feels counterintuitive, at least to someone with my background. But different isn't always bad. I can't score it higher than boxing though, so let's give it a 4. Taekwondo. I have huge personal issues with Taekwondo. Yes, there's some impressive stuff when you watch it demonstrated, but when you watch competition, it looks ridiculous. Is anyone impressed with board breaking anymore? Sorry, Taekwondo folk, but you're getting a 2. Wing Chun. There's a pretty well-established theory that Wing Chun was heavily influenced by English pugilism, which is probably one of the reasons I like it. Without getting into whether it works or not just yet, I think you probably have to agree that it's pretty flashy. I think it has to score relatively highly, so I'm going to give it 6. That's aesthetics ranked, and shockingly, it seems that currently Aikido is in the lead. Yeah, let's move on. Effectiveness. Aikido. It's a 1. It doesn't work. It didn't work when I trained in it. It doesn't work now. If you want to prove me wrong, please do. But you're going to struggle. Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Yes, there are some flaws in modern competition BJJ, but there's no denying it revolutionised combat sports. And as a general rule of thumb, those people who claim it's too heavily controlled by rules to actually work in reality haven't actually done it. I'm going to give it a 7. Boxing. If punching were the only thing you could do, then boxing would be right at the top. But it isn't. Boxing has little to counter kicking or wrestling, so I can't really score it any higher than a 5. Catch wrestling. It has a much better standing game than BJJ, so I'm going to score it as an 8. I'm sure some of you disagree very strongly, but, I can live with that. HEMA. The problem here is that HEMA exists in a pretty effective echo chamber. And if that wasn't enough, there are whole branches of HEMA that aren't really about competitive fighting. I feel bad, but I'm going to score at 4. Sorry, HEMA people. Judo. I'd say that Judo is the most effective system of standing throws out there. It doesn't have much in the way of striking, and the groundwork isn't brilliant, but I'm still going to score it pretty highly. Like BJJ, boxing and catch, it's actually based on genuine resistance, so Judo gets an 8. Karate. Instructors like Ian Abernathy and Jesse Enkamp, they're doing great things, showing the actual combat applications of the art. But there are also a vast number of mediocre practitioners, training moves they don't really understand against no resistance. I can't score it high. I want to, but I can't. 4. Muay Thai. It works. Like boxing, the things it does, it's brilliant at. But like boxing, it doesn't do everything. But it does have elbows, kicks and knees in it, and the clinch work is definitely better than boxing. So I'm going to give it a 6. Ninjutsu, an art that's so tied up in its own fictionalised mythology that doesn't train against resistance, is never going to score highly here. Sorry, ninjas. 3. Savate. The punching isn't as good as boxing, the kicking isn't as good as taekwondo, the overall combination isn't as good as Muay Thai. 4? Taekwondo. You can't watch Olympic taekwondo and score at anything higher than a 3. You just can't. Wing Chun. There are some great things in Wing Chun. Some of the aspects of the style deserve much more appreciation than they get, but you can't get away from the fact that no one's ever really made it work in real competition. And if it doesn't work against genuine resistance, does it actually work? 3. Well, after 2 rounds, it's pretty close, with Muay Thai just scraping into the lead. Now let's look at consistency. Aikido. This is going to be a pretty high score. Aikido looks like Aikido wherever you go. If you saw a video online and decided it was something you wanted to do, the chances are your local club would teach you pretty much the same stuff. So, 8 out of 10. BJJ. The BJJ community is great at policing itself. There are a lot of arguments about who's best, about whether gi or no gi is best. But the fact is, BJJ is pretty consistent, and the grades are a fair representation of people's abilities. So 8. Boxing. This one's a little harder. There's a big variation in boxing. There are different styles and different approaches. There are some great coaches out there. Check out Matt Goddard from the Boxing Locker. But there are some less great coaches too. When it comes to consistency, I can't really score it any higher than a 5. Catch wrestling. It's a 4. There are some brilliant coaches out there, but there are some pretty shoddy ones too. Maybe one day it will be different, but right now people are too busy running each other down to create any type of consistency in the art. HEMA. There's absolutely no consistency in HEMA at all. Your local club may do German longsword and focus on competition and put out some great fighters. They may do Regency smallsword and never compete. They may be a group of reenactors who love polearms. They might be nationalist white supremacists who make stuff up and pretend it's real. Anyone in the world can start a HEMA club teaching anything they want. It's a 1. Judo. Grades are awarded based on success in actual fighting. Instructors don't get to teach unless they've shown they can both do it and also understand it. And that's the same wherever you go in the world. Judo scores 9. Karate. Lots of different styles, lots of different approaches, and sadly lots of schools selling themselves as karate when in fact they're not. It's a 3 for consistency. Muay Thai. There's a fair variety in Muay Thai, but at the heart of it, it's an art based on actual fighting, and it's relatively well policed by the community. Yes, some people argue about lineage, but I'd say even with that, it's still a pretty consistent art wherever you go. A club in Birmingham, England, isn't going to be vastly different to a club in Birmingham, Alabama. 7 out of 10. Ninjutsu. I trained in Bujinkan for a while, and there are some great people out there with a wealth of knowledge, some of whom can actually fight. But I've never trained in an art with as many fat old men teaching as ninjutsu. The variation is sadly huge. 4 out of 10. Savate. Because Savate's still pretty rare, and because there are people who do it for competition and people who do historical forms just for fun, I can't really give this a high score. 5. Taekwondo. I think Olympic Taekwondo has had a pretty negative effect on the art and has caused a bit of a split between those that compete and those that consider it to be a decent fighting system. And then you add in the kids' classes that seem to be everywhere with 10-year-old black belts. How do you reconcile that with someone like Joe Rogan? I can't score it any higher than a 3 for consistency. Wing Chun. One of the things that goes against Wing Chun in terms of effectiveness plays in its favour here. The fact that it's so easily recognisable, so different, and to a degree so insular, does mean that it's more consistent. Let's give it a 6. So now we've got our totals. Let's put them in order. What do you think? Do you agree with my assessment? I'm a little surprised at how the lists turned out, to be honest. Is judo actually the best martial art? Is Aikido really better than boxing? Is Taekwondo the worst thing you could possibly do? Put something in the comments. Let me know what you think. I am genuinely interested in what you think. I will read every single comment, and I always try and reply to as many of them as I can. If you've enjoyed this video, the chances are that you'll enjoy my older videos and the ones I'm going to be making in the future. Please consider subscribing if that's the case. It makes very little difference to your experience of YouTube, but it does change the way the algorithm treats my videos. If you want to support my channel directly, then you can hit the thanks button down below or sign up as a supporter on Patreon. If you're still with me, right at the very end of the video, fight team!